artists, welcome back to Meet the Masters. We have another artist this month. His name was Henri Rousseau. So Henri Rousseau was born in Laval, France on May 21st, 1844. He loved to draw as a child, but he never had any formal art training. After finishing high school, he moved to Paris and married Clemence. While living in Paris, he worked as a toll and tax collector. I thought this was a funny picture because that's somebody that not a lot of people like to deal with. So it's kind of a painting of a tax collector and the woman's chasing him away. So not very popular with the public. So at age 42, Rousseau retired from his job and began painting. Because he didn't have any formal training or connections, he premiered his artwork with the Society of Independent Artists. And here's a photograph of some of those founding members. Okay, so one of Henri's favorite motifs, or that means his subjects to paint, were jungles, animals, and exotic locations. And here's one of his most famous paintings. It's called Tiger in a Tropical Storm. You can notice the leaves, the grasses, and then the leaves in the tree are bending with the wind. And then there's a tiger here, and he's showing his teeth, and he's ready to pounce. There's a lot of rich color and detail in his paintings. Okay, so although Rousseau loved to paint the jungle and the animals that lived there, he actually never traveled outside of Paris. And so he needed inspiration and experience to paint those subjects. So he would often visit the gardens in Paris, the Natural History Museum, where they would have animals who were stuffed, and then the actual zoo in Paris. You can see a sculptor here working on a sculpture of a lion. Okay, so shortly after he started showing his paintings, he moved to this studio in Montparnasse in Paris, just a neighborhood of Paris. And he lived there until he died, and that's where he would paint. Here is The Sleeping Gypsy. This is another one of his most famous paintings. You see the lion here. There's a sleeping woman with their instrument, a full moon in the background. Notice the lion eyes. I think that's something that's so interesting about all of Rousseau's paintings, are a lot of times the eyes on the animals kind of look cartoonish, and they stand out among a lot of other artists. Okay, so speaking of standing out, this you might remember is one of Claude Monet's Water Lilies paintings. So Monet, Van Gogh, and our artist this month, Rousseau, were all living around the same time. So Monet was an impressionist. Remember, they would paint their impression and it often would be a little blurry, but the focus was on the light. And then we had Van Gogh, we learned about last year, and he was a post-impressionist, but his were also not super realistic. And we did the Starry Night project. You can remember that, I'm sure. So comparing this type of art that was being shown and that was kind of gaining popularity, still had criticism. This is very different. So it's almost, a lot of critics would say his art was primitive. So kind of pointing out that he wasn't formally trained, naive, that he didn't have the experience of real world travels into deserts and seeing exotic animals and different types of people. So when you go into a museum, I remember the first time seeing Rousseau paintings in real life, And the paintings that are in the same rooms with his contemporaries, like some Van Goghs, are very, very different. And so he had a lot of criticism. His really stood out, and they do, but I think they're really cool, full of rich color and detail. Even though they criticized them for being kind of flat in nature, I think they look really cool and unique. Okay, so let's talk about two different vocabulary words. You probably have heard about these before. So in a painting, you have the foreground, which is the area of the picture space nearest to the viewer. And then you also have the background. So that's the part of an artwork that lies in the distance and appears to be behind the main subject, or if you have more than one subject. Okay, so here is the hungry lion. Again, a jungle motif. We see the lion attacking its prey. Now, speaking of foreground and background, the animals are in the foreground, right? They're closest to us as a viewer. And then all those lovely, rich vines, leaves, trees, tropical plants are in the background because they're behind us. Also, notice the setting sun. Those would be in the background. They're behind the main subject, which are the animals who are in the foreground. Okay, easy enough. Here's another really cool painting called the Snake Charmer. So you can see there's a woman here. Her eyes are glowing as she's playing an instrument, and there's animals surrounding her. There's, again, very lush tropical plants. You can see snakes in the tree. Again, another full moon. He loved to put those full moons into his paintings. So if we're thinking about foreground and background again, foreground this time we've got some plants that are closest to us, and that's going to be in the foreground, even though our main subject is behind them. And then in the background, we've got perhaps the snake in the tree, and then the trees that are behind the snake charmer. Okay, so in 1908, Pablo Picasso was shopping, and he said he found a Rousseau painting that was being sold to be painted over. So someone had it for sale and said, here, you can paint over this canvas. And he loved the painting and he thought it was fantastic. And so he hosted this famous banquet called the Banquet for Rousseau. And this is an artistic rendering of the banquet with lots of other artists and creatives and thinkers of the time. So they became good friends, and Picasso really liked him. Remember last year we learned about Picasso? We made the instrument pictures. He was famous for his Cubist movement. Okay, so here's another called The Repast of the Lion. So you can see the lion here. I just love these. They're like so saturated in color, and I love the lush plants and flowers. This interesting plant over here in white. Again, foreground, background, we've got some plants more in the foreground. We've got either a setting sun or maybe even a rising moon in the background. Move over here so you can see. Okay, another one called the Equatorial Jungle with lots of plants. You can see the animals just peeking out. A lot of times in his paintings, animals would be peeking out behind the plants. So that will come into play when we're making our projects. Remember that. Other flowers that he may have seen at the Paris Gardens, or he drew inspiration and created his own. Okay, so you're probably thinking, what is this doing here? Here is a picture grab from the movie Madagascar. When the illustrators were creating the movie Madagascar, they drew a lot from Rousseau's paintings, they said. So the way he would arrange his foliage, like plants, grasses, trees, and flowers, was really important to them when they were illustrating for the movie. Okay, so you can see the grass is right here, foreground, then you've got your lion, and the background, really rich, lush vegetation, a lot like Rousseau's paintings. Let's see another one. And then here's another one. I think you can really see the influence of Rousseau in all of those plants behind the animals. So that's pretty fun. All right, and then here's another one that I really like called the Merry Jesters. You can see these monkeys. You've got a little bit of grass in the foreground. Then behind that, our main subjects, we've got our monkeys, and in the background, we've got more trees and leaves and foliage behind them. Okay, I love how in a lot of his paintings also the animals are looking right at us, right at the viewer. And so it sometimes can come off a little cartoonish and flat, but I think it's pretty striking when you look at them. And then one more, the exotic landscape. Really beautiful, lots of color. I love these fruits and birds in the trees. Again, lots of plants coming up, all different kinds, all different colors. Okay, so let's take our quiz and see if you learned anything. Question number 1. What was Rousseau's career prior to painting? A butcher, B, a baker, or C, a toll and tax collector? You got it. It was a toll and tax collector, not very popular with the public. Next question, true or false? Rousseau traveled extensively to gather inspiration for his jungle paintings. Correct. The answer is false. He never traveled outside of Paris. He only visited the Paris gardens, museums, and zoo to get inspiration and see what those animals actually look like in real life. And then last question. What makes Rousseau's paintings unique or different? A, the cubes and geometric shapes. B, the blurry images. Or C, the primitive, flat, and naive plants and animals. Great job. The answer is C. I hope you got 100%. Here's one last photograph of Rousseau a little later in life. I hope you learned a little bit about Henri Rousseau. We're going to have a really fun project, so I will see you soon. Thanks for watching.